Hello, and welcome to the Sidekick Stories podcast, encouraging conversations about mental health. Today I'm speaking to Richard Wallace. Hi, Richard.
Hey, Matt.
How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Good
to be here.
Good. Really pleased to have you. So today's going to be a slightly different format to our other podcast. We previously had your wife Kate on the podcast, talking about her experiences with postnatal depression. This episode, we're going to have an open and honest conversation about your experiences in terms of supporting and living with someone going through a mental health challenge. In this particular case, postnatal depression. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Very good.
So we've heard from Kate's perspective, first person, what she went through. I can only imagine how difficult that was for you to support her through that. Perhaps we start at the beginning from in terms of when you first realised there was an issue, and tell us about the story to date.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think overall it's just very hard to recognise when something is an issue, because you're going through a situation which is completely new. Like, I suppose it's your first child. You may have heard of these things, but you've only heard them described as sort of, terms. You've never heard in detail of what symptoms are, or what you should look for, what it should feel like. And it's very hard to disaggregate. Is this just normal because it's completely new, versus is there something wrong here? So I think you just ultimately go through a sort of cycle of, things are getting a bit tougher, but isn't it tough for everyone? This is what it should be like. And it's very hard to know at what point do you say, well, actually, this isn't normal.
And because I know, like, we both at one stage were first-time parents. You've got Henry. Henry's now 4.
4 now, yeah.
4. My daughter's 14 months, so I've still got that memory of the first 3 to 6 months as a first-time parent, and I'm sure you have too. Like, it's really intense. And as I was preparing for this, for our chat, I was thinking, how hard is it to recognise, like you just said, like, when things are just tough because you've just got a first kid and frankly you've got no idea what you're doing, compared to actually there really is something going on.
And I think one of my main reflections is that you hear the term anxiety a lot. Oh, someone's anxious, but you never hear how it manifests. Right? And actually it can manifest in so many different ways, from being angry to being upset to being withdrawn. And it's such a nebulous term that actually it makes it almost impossible to pinpoint what it means.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my biggest reflection would be, how do you understand what anxiety is and how it manifests?
And I suppose it's like you said, like, even if you did have that understanding, you had that pinpoint checklist. I mean, it's a process, right? It doesn't just switch on.
Yeah, absolutely. But you definitely fairly quickly get to a level where, whatever this is called, it's not sustainable. Yeah. Right? So we don't know whether it's normal or not, but it's definitely not sustainable. And then, this is not uncommon, is it? But there's no clear process to go through to diagnose what it is and then how you treat it. And I think that's where ultimately that for us, I think, made things much more challenging, because it takes so long to get to the cause of what's going on, and then you almost try things to resolve it in a linear sequence. And there could be 10 things you could try, but you don't tend to try them all at once. You do sort of one, then you do the next, and that could take 2 years.
Yeah. And the process of living through those 2 years is tough.
Yeah, totally. So it's very hard to know what are the options, but much harder to know how do you prioritize those options.
So take us back. So from your account, we've heard from Kate's account as experience going through it. Like, what was like from your perspective? When did it start to manifest? When did you realise something wasn't quite right? And how did you feel?
Not super early on, but I think once you're a few months in, then it starts to manifest in being on edge more, clearly not massively enjoying things, but not to a level where you would see it was abnormal. Through to certain pressure points where you might have you sort of start break down a bit or start crying, and those are the kind of points where it's a signal that actually we're not all quite all right here, and we should think about how we tackle this. So I think it's those it's sort of those points where it gets too much, that when they start happening more frequently, it's like, right, yeah, this isn't right.
And is it hard, so when those flare-ups happen, to be able to approach the topic as a partner to say, I'm not sure something is quite right with you, or I think, like you said, this isn't sustainable?
I mean, I think we can very openly say something's not right.
Yeah.
It was more about what do you do about it, because you get so many advice from different sources, and largely all from unqualified viewpoints. And so actually the tension probably between us was more around not talking about something not being right, but actually who do you listen to for advice?
Yeah.
And how, when you're trying something like sort of counselling or therapy, and it's not seemingly gaining traction, at what point do you pull the plug on it and try and do something else? That's probably where that's probably where the tension comes, because effectively between me and Kate or whoever, you're just trading opinions on whether or not you think it's working.
Yeah.
And trading opinions without any sort of evidence, from a totally unqualified position.
Yeah, absolutely.
And someone when you're that up close to it, is very hard to be objective.
And it seemed to me that from when speaking with Kate, there was one particular doctor who realised, or was able to act much faster than perhaps some of the other advice that was given, that suddenly started to turn things around a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, so what happened was, yes, it was interesting. If I look back on it, gone through various counselling, etc., recommended by various different people, but it was a friend who wasn't super close, so could be a bit objective, and was also a doctor, and could say, I recommend you go and see X GP, because I think they could help. So it was really, and that X GP was spot on. Had actually personally suffered from this before herself, so could give could give a very clear view, both from her professional, extensive years in general practice, and also her personal life, of a sort of reassurance of actually medication could, is the right option.
And
right?
That was really the turning point, right?
That was the turning point, but it was pure, I wouldn't say it's chance, but we didn't get there in a systematic way. Had that sort of neutral friend not said, go and see X,
it could still be going on, right?
We could have stumbled on for another 6-12 months doing random stuff. And all that random stuff could work for some people, but it is so random. Like, how could my biggest reflection, how could we have got there straight away, rather than, it must have been circa 12 months of trying different. I know you have to try things, but
yeah, it's interesting because as you go through the post-birth, the health visitors and the midwives are, from my experience, were always asking, especially in the first few weeks, about the feelings around. It was quite obvious they were asking around any symptoms of of postnatal depression. But like you said, like, even if those symptoms are have arisen, there's there's an entire spectrum of potential options. There's not like a checklist we say, if you're like this and like this, you should probably try this subset. And therefore it might give you a chance, because living through that, especially whilst caring for a new child and being exhausted at the same time, must be really hard.
Yeah. And there's amazing, I think it's symptomatic, and I'm by absolutely being no expert, but it's symptomatic of sort of broader mental health landscape in the UK, right? Yes, you get a lot of support early on from midwives, etc., but 6-9 months in, you're back.
Yeah.
You're back by yourself, which is often when this stuff can start to manifest. And I think I don't know I think my second biggest learning, and of course this is in the backdrop of mental health becoming much more front of mind for the population as a whole, is that actually medication is not something to shy away from. Yes, it's very serious, and yes, obviously, I'm not talking as the person who has to take it, etc. But if you elevate mental health to the same as I don't know, a more visually manifesting illness, you wouldn't question taking medication, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure these are things that you hear everyone say who's been through this, but they are truths that I don't understand. We have to find a way for people to just realise that without having to go through the pain of it first.
Yeah, which like you said, takes an enormous toll. So from a being an objective point of view, but being someone who is caring and was was caring for Kate at the time, like how did you cope?
Well, I guess I've personally, mentally, I've always been quite resilient, but undoubtedly it takes its toll. You find yourself getting shorter and more curt, and you sort of realise that you're not necessarily the person you want to be, but that's just how you end up behaving. But I think because you're always mindful, it's not you still have to look out and try and still be doing the best for Kate.
Yeah.
And trying to help her objectively, I think, is what helped keep me more level.
Did you find as well that taking on, for example, more of the childcare to ease the burden of childcare, so that Kate can have a little bit of space, was that something that helped?
To us, I mean, not really, to be honest. I think I'm not sure there were loads of practical things that could have helped. That like that. I'm not sure it was the core. It's very hard to find out causality, right, around all this stuff. But we couldn't have linked that spending X amount of time with Henry was causing it, right? So.
Yeah. So it was more around that emotional support.
Yeah, exactly. But it's difficult because you can be supportive, but you can't really help because you don't know what the problem is.
Yeah. And I suppose you can listen, you can have conversations, but we always come back to that first 6 months of having a new baby is intense. There's often very little space to listen, and actually you're adjusting yourself as a new dad.
Yeah, totally. Exactly right. Yeah.
So you talked about yourself being resilient, and is that something that you have that's come naturally to you, or is it something that you've built up over time? And
it's a mixture of the two. Yes, naturally, I think resilient slash very level. I don't have a personality that has big highs and big lows. In you know, whatever walk of life, I'm generally very sort of level and calm, which, you know, is in one respect a benefit, but also has its downs. You know, also has its downsides in that people may perceive me to be disengaged or uninterested or not passionate enough about something. But that's just because I'm very level.
Yeah.
You know, I might be still feel very passionate about something. And I guess the other thing that I reflect on is I probably got a lot of, I draw a lot of sort of energy and resilience from doing lots of different things. So I've always been very passionate about work, you know, my job, but I've also done different sport, be that rowing or cycling or running, and have developed great other friendships through that. So I've always had quite a big mix of things going on, which I think personally for me, that variety keeps me energized, or keeps me energized, which keeps me resilient.
And at the same time as well, like if you were feeling in yourself feeling particularly low at a certain point, you've almost got like a menu of options. You're like, okay, I could go for I could do some exercise, row, run, cycle. I could go and see some friends. So there's a whole kind of array of things that you're able to choose from.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very much subconsciously, right? But nonetheless, I think that what's very hard is if you're at home all the time, even if you're doing all manner of the classes and getting out and seeing people, you can't have a change of scenery easily. It's not like you're going to a different office for the day, or you're doing a different project at work, or to your point, you're going cycling with a group, or you're going up walking in Scotland with your friends, you know. So I don't know to what extent that having that sort of variety can help energize. It's different for everyone, right?
It is. It's something we hear a lot, and you know, around that kind of that whole variety. And you know, whilst each there are lots of different tools and tips that people use for themselves. One thing, the common theme that does come out is that in order to maintain a sustainable level of positivity, doing several things seems to be very important, as opposed to just focusing on one thing. And I think that also goes, like you said, when we're talking in the postnatal depression as well, there was a period where you were very focused on a particular counselling, also medication at the same time. Then from my memory, that Kate, when things started to improve as well, she was able to do also a variety of things that were able to keep her positive and boosted at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the counselling or the medication or whatever works for people is almost the enabler to get to that broader mix of things, which then set you up for longer term, longer term horizon. But without, in our specific case, without the medication, you wouldn't have got to those other things. It wasn't an either or, it was a medication that dramatically reversed the situation, which then unlocked, doing lots of other things.
And so, and then when Kate first started taking the medication, like, can you tell us about how you perceived from an objective perspective the differences in the change of anxiety, of behaviour, of your experience at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it was like flicking a switch. It was like flicking a light switch.
Honestly, literally like that. Is that on day one? Overnight? Yeah.
Wow. Much happier. I wouldn't say relaxed, but less anxious. Things that had been a big deal were not. Mood swings virtually vanished. So things that, little things that might trigger a big reaction, triggered no reaction. From really tiny things like, I don't know, not passing the TV remote, in a certain way or something, it's just like not even a matter of comment, which could have been a flare up. I mean, so it was marked immediately, which was it was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And at that time, when that first day happened, and there was that change in a positive way, did both you and Kate recognize it? Could you tell that Kate recognized that actually, I think this is working?
Definitely. I think me to a bigger extent, purely because obviously it's just, I think it's easier for somebody else to be more objective. I think it's very hard for you as the person taking it. It's very hard to try and quantify or sort of assess yourself. But certainly from someone else taking it. And look, I mean, they are big decisions at the time. I completely get it's very nerve-wracking to have to do, because I think partly because it is a big unknown, right? And so with hindsight, or somebody who doesn't actually have to take it, it's much easier to say yes, of course.
And it's interesting, the more episodes we do and we talk to people who have been on medication, like there is a stigma around medication. That's what we talk about, we hear a lot. But at the same time, most of the stories where people are on medication, okay, we've had one episode where someone was on the wrong medication and that went very badly, but then once got onto the right medication was a lifesaver, and like you said, enabled them to live in a way that promoted kind of positivity, well-being, and it seems to me that this area, which does have a huge stigma, does have a very positive impact for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point that there is no single fix, but a way to find your fix is what's really missing. And the more that can be done to address that, and that's where the fastest improvement will be. From in our specific example, it could have cut 6 to 12 months off finding an answer,
which is a very, very long time at the time, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think the only way to get there is just through more awareness. There's no silver bullet. It's things like this. It's broader awareness. Just keep spreading the message, and
at the same time, words aren't often nothing. There's a lot of talk at the moment around mental health. A lot of talk, and often on these podcasts, we'll have prior to the podcast, when talking to people and saying, would they like to come on and talk? Often it's a very hard and it's a very personal thing to be able to do, but it seems like there's a combination of people who come on here who both combine the words and the action. And it seems from both yours and Kate's point of view, that was exactly it. That's like, there is an issue, we're talking about it, but we're also going to really take action on this proactively at the same time.
Yeah. And I think ideally you want to get to a stage where you don't sort of proactively really have to do that in a way. You want to sort of head it off sooner, rather than really waiting till it's really, really bad.
And it's a good point when you were saying, trying to whittle down that 6 to 12 months to actually come to a definitive choice. Like, what would your tips and recommendations be for another partner who is supporting someone or is noticing that something is wrong, particularly from the postnatal side of things?
I mean, my main reflection would be that this is, mental health is like physical health, And if you think you have a problem, then you need to go through the logical process of using the infrastructure that's in place, which is going to a GP and getting and getting a couple of GPs' opinions.
Yeah.
But having a systematic process that starts there, and then almost the steps they recommend are, given a certain, they lay out a clear plan with steps that you make a call on the different treatments at a certain point, which you need their advice on. Like, don't just send me away and tell me to do X therapy. Tell me, try it for X weeks and come back. And if nothing's changed, will we move to, at something else? But, they're the experts, right? But don't think that you can solve this yourself with your own ideas.
Yeah, that's a really good
you have to recognize that as an individual, either experiencing it or on the sidelines, you can't make your own diagnosis.
Yeah. So having that relationship with the GP is something that you would advise, you recommend as being fundamentally important, because I certainly don't have I wouldn't say I have a relationship with a GP. And if it's something that perhaps maybe more of us should do, especially around these particular longer term issues as well.
Yeah, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because the GP is completely depersonalized for most people, or certainly in my experience.
Yeah.
I think probably 20 years ago, the environment might be different where people sort of knew their GP more. But personally, you go to a part of a big GP practice and you may or may not see the same person because of how they operate their business. I mean, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost like that's definitely the right start point. You might just have to have a couple of goes at getting a couple of different perspectives from GPs.
And so it seems like that you were talking at the beginning about that systematic approach, that you would want that approach to be put in play. Did you find that when you went to the GP or went into the system, so to speak, that actually there was a systematic approach? So do you think that kind of first few months of trying things, not yourselves, but trying things ourselves, where we're saying, okay, we're going to try a few things before going down that route?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of partially successful. It's definitely up to the individual to, I think, to try and push that agenda a bit more.
And especially when we're talking about something like postnatal depression, I mean, it's very serious.
Yeah, totally. So we definitely need more help on calling time on certain activities, without a doubt, because you have to try and solve it quickly, which is really difficult, because how long do you let a certain type of therapy go on for?
Yeah,
it's like, just another week might do it, or another month might help, another 3 sessions. But how do you know?
And often it's tricky in that professional environment, because there may be conflicting advice. That therapist may say you need another 6 weeks, and so you'll say, okay, well, I'm told to, my GP is saying, let's say, or I'm thinking, actually, I really want to get this sorted. I need to be able to try a few things every couple of weeks, every 3 weeks. But if someone is also the person you're seeing, also you are the client. So for me in those situations, I'm thinking, okay, who can I actually trust here? It seems that going back to the GP, for example, does provide a level of trust that you can say, okay, there's a central point which that person has my back, has my long-term interest at heart, and therefore actually stopping a treatment or stopping seeing someone for after 2 or 3 weeks because I don't feel it's working is okay, and you can move on.
Yeah, and I think they probably, and I'm it's totally unqualified opinion, is the single point of contact that has oversight of all of the options, and effectively an agnostic view of the world, and therefore is the most logical point of coordination, because it is so multifaceted, all the different types of, from acupuncture to counselling to medication. They're all very different disciplines in a way. And then I guess there's not-for-profits or charities or organisations that can kind of start to paint a picture of that, but not necessarily advise to an expert level. And so being very clear on the role of those sort of support functions, I guess.
And as a couple, like you said at the beginning about having there's lots of opinions coming from places which might be deemed unqualified. As a couple, pulling together and saying, okay, this is our trusted source of information. This is the person or the people that we're going to rely on. And any other opinions can, frankly, at the moment, just be pushed to the side.
Yeah, I mean, that's a learning, I think, with hindsight. Yeah, definitely a learning. Yeah.
And it's, in terms of, since it's got much better now.
Yeah, massively.
How are you more aware of, or would you say you're more emotionally aware of Kate, your partner, of yourself going through this process? Are you I think you seem to be more aware of what's qualified advice and what's not qualified advice.
Yeah, I'm definitely completely agree. And also just much more mindful that in any walk of life, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It is the ultimate hidden or invisible illness. And so an awareness, sort of whatever you're doing, that no one gets out of bed every day to do a bad job or be a bad person, right? That's just not human nature. But you never know what's going on. And so I think even in work, at work or whatever you're doing, it creates a sort of extra level of awareness that I think is a part has just been because of the awareness in society is much greater.
Yeah.
But definitely significantly influenced by personal experience. Yeah.
And have you found, like you said, you what a big part of your life is your job. You get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Have you found, okay, maybe you're not in the lockdown experience over Zoom, but have you found yourself becoming more, I suppose, more sensitive and aware to perhaps that, you're having conversation with someone and they say something and it's kind of like, okay, well, put work aside. Are you okay?
Yeah. And it's, the lockdown period has been fascinating. Because I think, number one, you have to be very mindful that people may not be very focused all the time, which is absolutely fine. And you just have to adapt accordingly. The hardest bit is picking out the people you think may be struggling.
Yeah. Because
it's, talking personally from what I've seen, it's not the people you would expect. It's not the people who, in an office environment or where you're seeing people face to face all the time, you cannot predict who will then find it really tough being alone or having to work without face to face, where mind games kick in around what they think other people might be thinking.
Yeah.
And you just, I think, being very open and creating the space to have those open conversations.
Great point.
And signaling that, okay, so it's absolutely, we're going to talk about this now.
Yeah.
If you want to, or there's space for it. Or everyone else, these are common things to feel.
And it's a really interesting point you're saying as we do this podcast over Zoom, and we're saying that there's a lot less face to face. There's only so much you can take from, you know, a shoulder up digital image.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, I think it'd be hard in an hour-long conversation where you're focused on points X, Y, and Z to be able to deduce or maybe get a sense that something's not quite right with someone. And then when effectively the camera is off, then that you know, that awareness from your perspective ceases. Whereas that difficulties and the struggles with someone else, that they may be harboring some really, really, really challenging, you know, challenging thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And unless you're aware of it, you know, you can't do anything about it. So you just have to create the space, and you have to signal it. I think you know, you have to be able to talk openly about these things. But critically, you have to know the signals. And if you haven't been through something personally, you know, the best people I've anecdotally seen who can detect the people who are struggling are people who have been through something like that themselves.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're blindsided. You just may not see it. To your point, you drop on and off. You see someone's face on from here up for an hour. You know?
Yeah. So in a professional environment, I'm sure you've got colleagues that are, you know, that may be starting families and things like that. Do you feel that will you make space for a conversation in terms of, you know, I'm sure that obviously you have to be quite friendly with your colleagues, but to talk about some of the potential things that frankly you're not taught at antenatal classes, like from the experiences that you've been through. Would you make a proactive effort to say, okay, you know, please consider this?
Yeah, I think you need to create an environment for people to be able to work the way they want to work.
Yeah,
in my view, it's a bit of a two-way. It's up to individuals to be to culture carriers and to set to be bold and set out how they want to work. And then it's up to the employer to accommodate that and be flexible. So I see it as a bit of a two-way, you know, be a culture carrier, make it work for you, because you give a lot as well. But as an employer, make sure you're allowing that and being flexible. And I think the one interesting thing about lockdown, which has been really positive actually, is to consciously make time to then discuss how people's well-being is.
Yeah.
So really concrete, right? Flipped a lot of the review conversations to start, or almost majority focus on just well-being.
Okay, so that's a one-on-one. You know, that's part of your 365 review process, whatever it is.
Yeah, through lockdown, because actually that is number one. The well-being and safety of your people is actually more important, and that's always been true, but has been amplified through COVID, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting. Firms are certainly more cognizant of it. Certainly, it seems to be making more of a proactive effort at it. But also that comes from internally as well. You know, we've all gone through lockdown. We all know the experiences that it can place on people. It can, like you said, it can rear things that you never thought were there, and presents a very difficult environment for you to actually try and kind of deal with these issues or deal with those challenges. And it seems like there is a lot of positivity coming out of this lockdown. My personal fear is what happens if we go into a second lockdown. Do you think we're better? Do you think we could be more resilient as a result of the first?
So I think we have much better tools and awareness to cope with it. But I think we need them because the toll is probably going to be greater. I think partly because of probably the seasonality. I do think winter is a much harder time.
Just in general.
Yeah. And I think, yes, because of a lot of the things that people draw on to energize them disappear.
Yeah. Good point.
And then I think the ongoing, mentally, people have set themselves up, I think, we get through the summer and we get back to some form, the new normal, as everyone says. I think it's altogether a different mental setup to get into a 12, 18 month slog.
Yeah. And especially, and I've certainly, of course, people without children or families, there are huge, there are huge issues or challenges around isolation. Speaking from a parental perspective, and you yourself as well, these lockdowns, they put huge pressures on families, and those pressures can cause these things to rear.
Yeah, and one of the ways I think one of the learnings I guess I've applied from probably when we were doing our own uni, when I've been working on lengthy projects at work, is to try and just work day by day.
Yeah.
And you almost just have to enjoy the days.
Yeah. Really
and
good.
take your mind off, I know, when the transaction completes, or when you do your rowing race in the summer or whatever. It's like you just
enjoying the process.
Yeah, exactly. And that is, I think, the only thing that I found that actually makes it workable.
Yeah.
Because having an end goal in the future that you keep thinking about, try and shoot to, it just doesn't work for me personally. I can't sustain it.
And I completely agree. And it's interesting when you've got these big goals, you do miss out on some of the subtleties of and some of the joys and excitement of life that you never really realize. And so, for example, perhaps as a concluding note, on a day-to-day basis now, as you're enjoying your day-to-day, what things do you enjoy? Do you take joy out of that perhaps you didn't before?
It's a really good question. I think the very simple things.
Yeah.
Right? That's almost what life's gone back to, isn't it? Try and decomplicate stuff. Whatever tasks you're doing, just try and enjoy them. And that is the day, right? It is no more complicated than that.
A perfect cup of tea, hot buttered toast.
Yeah, exactly right. You just have to get up, breathe, enjoy those things, and that is success.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to finish on. Richard, thank you so much for a fascinating, insightful conversation, and especially in the context of supporting Kate, who went through a very long, I'd say a very long, torturous time suffering with postnatal depression. So thank you so much for your time.
Not at all. Thank you.
And thank you to everyone listening. You can subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Just search for Sidekick Community or Psychic Stories and we'll pop up.